The wind carried the smell of rain that morning, soft, cold, and heavy, like the sky itself was tired. In the small, forgotten town of Maple Hollow, the streets were lined with cracked pavement and rusted mailboxes. People there didn't talk much about dreams anymore. Dreams were for other places, other people, not for those trying to make ends meet. But for Eli Turner, 12 years old and full of quiet wonder, dreams were all he had. His world was a small trailer sitting at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by dry weeds and the distant hum of freight trains. The walls were thin, patched with duct tape and hope. Inside, a single flickering bulb hung from the ceiling, buzzing faintly, as if reminding them that light, no matter how dim, still mattered. Eli's mother, Clara Turner, worked 3 jobs and slept very little. Her hands were calloused from scrubbing floors, her smile weary but soft. Every morning before sunrise, she'd whisper the same words before leaving for work. "Sing something beautiful today, Eli." Even if the world doesn't listen, he always did. Eli didn't have toys or gadgets, but he had a voice that seemed too big for his small frame. He didn't realize it was special. It was simply the sound of his heart trying to find warmth in a cold world. He'd sing while washing the cracked dishes, while feeding the stray dog that slept outside the trailer, while walking to school with his old backpack slung over one shoulder. He sang quietly, as if afraid the world might take even that away. Most days nobody noticed him, and if they did, it wasn't kindly. At Maple Hollow Elementary, he was the poor boy. The one who wore the same faded shirt for a week. The one who sometimes skipped lunch because he said he wasn't hungry. Kids noticed things like that, and sometimes they weren't gentle about it. "Hey, Turner," one boy sneered once. "Your mom forget to pay for your haircut again?" Eli didn't answer. He just smiled faintly, looked down, and whispered, "Guess she was too busy feeding me." But inside it hurt. Every word, every laugh, every reminder that he didn't belong. Still, when school ended and the halls emptied, Eli would slip into the old music room, a forgotten space with an out-of-tune piano and dust dancing in the sunlight. There he found his freedom. He'd close his eyes, place a hand on the piano's chipped keys, and sing. His voice wasn't polished. It was raw, trembling, but pure. It carried something that couldn't be taught: truth. It was the kind of sound that made you stop whatever you were doing because it felt like it came from a place too deep for words. One afternoon, as Eli sang softly to himself, he didn't realize someone was standing by the door. It was Mrs. Daniels, the music teacher, a kind woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that always looked like they'd seen more kindness than the world deserved. She listened quietly, hand pressed to her chest. The song he was singing wasn't one she recognized, simple, wordless, but full of ache. When he finally stopped and turned around, embarrassed, she smiled. "That's the most beautiful thing I've heard in years," she said softly. Eli blinked. You heard that?" "I'd be proud if the whole world did." He blushed, gripping the edge of the piano. "It's just something I do for fun." "It's not just something," she said. "It's a gift." That word, gift, echoed in his mind for days. He'd never thought of himself as someone who had anything to give. A week later, Mrs. Daniels announced the school talent show. It wasn't much, just a small event for parents and students, a chance for kids to show off their skills. But to Eli, it felt like the edge of the universe. When she asked for volunteers to audition, the classroom went silent. No one wanted to go first. Then, from the back, a soft voice said, "I can try." Heads turned. A few giggles. Some eye rolls. Eli stood, clutching his notebook. He didn't have an instrument or a fancy song. He just had his voice and his courage. When he walked to the front, the floor creaked under his worn shoes. He could feel his classmates staring, waiting for him to mess up. His hands were shaking. His throat was dry. He closed his eyes. And then, he sang. At first, his voice was quiet, fragile. But then it grew, rich, powerful, full of emotion no 12-year-old should have known. It was like hearing the story of every lonely night, every whispered prayer, every dream too afraid to come out. The room went still. Even the bullies stopped smirking. Mrs. Daniels had tears in her eyes. When Eli finished, there was silence. Not awkward silence, but the kind that feels holy. The kind that wraps around you like warmth. Then, one by one, people started clapping. It was hesitant at first, then thunderous. Eli looked up, startled. He wasn't used to applause. Mrs. Daniels walked up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Eli," she whispered, "you don't just sing, you heal." That night, he ran all the way home, his heart racing, his mind spinning. When he burst into the trailer, his mother was at the sink washing dishes. "Ma!" he said, breathless. They clapped. "Everyone did." She turned, smiling with tired eyes. "See? Told you the world would listen one day." He hugged her tightly. It was the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. "Thank you. I love you. I'll make you proud." And for a little while, things felt lighter. But miracles rarely come easy. The week of the talent show, his mother fell ill. She kept saying it was just a cold, but Eli knew it was more. Her hands trembled when she reached for things. Her breathing grew heavy. Still, she insisted he perform. "Don't you dare skip it for me," she whispered, smiling weakly. "You go up there and sing like the whole world's listening." So he did. The gymnasium was packed that Saturday. Families, teachers, students. The air buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the occasional squeak of sneakers on the floor. When Eli's name was called, the room quieted. He walked to the microphone. It was old, crackling with static. His palms were sweating. He looked out and saw his mother sitting in the very last row, pale but smiling. He took a deep breath. And then he sang. This time it wasn't just music. It was magic. His voice filled every corner of the gym, every heart in the crowd. It carried pain and hope all at once. The sound of someone who had nothing but still dared to dream. By the time he finished, people were crying. Parents, students, even teachers. The applause that followed wasn't just clapping, it was gratitude. Someone recorded the performance on their phone. By Monday morning, that video was online. By Tuesday, it had 1,000 views. By Friday, 1,000,000. And by the next week, the whole world was listening. The sun hadn't yet risen when Eli woke to the sound of his mother's breathing. Shallow, uneven, struggling. The small trailer was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional cough that shook the fragile walls. He sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred, smiling weakly. "You sang beautifully, baby," she whispered. "Everyone's still talking about you." He smiled, trying to hide his worry. "You saw the video, right? Mrs. Daniels said it's everywhere now." "Everywhere?" He nodded. "Like, really everywhere. She said people from other countries are watching. Some are saying my voice made them cry." She laughed softly, a thin, breathy sound. "Told you the world would listen someday." But even as she said it, her eyes drifted shut again, and Eli felt a chill of fear. He didn't want to admit it, but something deep inside him whispered that time was running out. By the next morning, the story had taken over the internet. "Poor boy's voice touched millions around the world." That was the headline on dozens of sites. Clips of his trembling little frame on stage were everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, even the evening news. The world was falling in love with a boy from nowhere. Comments poured in from across the globe. His voice healed something inside me I didn't know was broken. This boy sings like he's seen heaven. Someone help this child. His voice deserves the world. People wanted to know who he was, where he came from, why his eyes looked like they'd seen both pain and peace all at once. Mrs. Daniels' inbox flooded with requests. News stations called the school. Record producers emailed her. Even a famous talk show in New York wanted to fly Eli out for an interview. But while the world watched in awe, Eli's reality hadn't changed. Not yet. The same torn shoes. The same cracked walls. The same worry in his mother's eyes. When Mrs. Daniels visited the trailer that week, she found Eli sitting outside. tuning an old guitar someone had dropped off anonymously at the school for him. He looked up and smiled. "It's a little broken, but it still plays." She sat beside him. "So do you, Eli," she said gently. "And look how beautiful your music turned out." He laughed quietly. "People online keep saying I'm special, but I'm just me." "That's exactly what makes you special," she said. "You sing from where it hurts, and people feel that. The world doesn't need perfect. It needs real." Days turned into weeks, and the video kept spreading. Eli's story reached television hosts, celebrities, and ordinary people who saw their own struggles reflected in his song. Woman in Japan who hadn't spoken since her husband's death began to sing again. After watching him, a soldier overseas sent a message saying Eli's voice reminded him of home. A father in Brazil played the video for his daughter fighting cancer, saying, "Listen, sweetheart, this is what hope sounds like." And in every message, one thing echoed. His voice made me feel less alone. But while the world healed, Eli's mother grew weaker. Her illness, long ignored, long fought, was now stealing her strength faster than he could understand. The doctors said she needed treatment they couldn't afford. When Eli found out, he didn't cry. He just sat in silence for a long time, staring at the peeling wallpaper, the sound of her labored breathing filling the small space. That night, he went to the edge of the field behind their trailer, guitar in hand. The stars were faint, the air heavy with the scent of rain. He sang, not for fame, not for the world, but for her. It was a song made of prayer and promise, of every "I love you" he hadn't said out loud, and somehow, someone heard it. A neighbor walking his dog recorded the moment, the moonlight glinting off the guitar strings, Eli's voice carrying into the night like something from another world. By morning, that clip too was everywhere. This time, it wasn't just a viral video. It was a movement. People began raising funds for his mother's treatment. Letters poured in, thousands of them, from strangers offering help, prayers, love. A local hospital called, saying an anonymous donor had covered the full cost of her medical care. When Eli heard, he broke down for the first time. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, gratitude so big it hurt. He ran to his mother's bedside and told her. She smiled through tears. "See?" she whispered. The world listened, and it answered. Weeks later, she began to recover. Her color returned. Her laughter returned. And though she was still fragile, hope had come home again. Meanwhile, invitations flooded in. Record labels, charities, schools, news programs. But Eli only accepted one. A children's hospital in Chicago asked if he'd come sing for the kids. That, he said, was the one that mattered. When he arrived, nervous and clutching his guitar, he didn't expect much. But when he walked into that bright, sterile room, dozens of children in wheelchairs and hospital beds looked up, smiling at him like he was a miracle. He swallowed hard, sat on a stool and began to play. No cameras, no stage lights, just him, his voice, and a room full of fragile hearts. He sang his mother's song, the one from that night in the field. And as his voice rose, the room filled with something beyond music. It was peace. It was faith. It was the sound of hope refusing to die. Nurses stopped in the hallways to listen. Parents wept quietly. When he finished, one little girl, no older than 8, whispered, "Thank you." "I didn't think I'd ever smile again." He smiled back, his eyes glistening. "You just did." Someone recorded that moment too. And just like before, it spread like wildfire. But this time, it wasn't about fame. It was about connection. People around the world began organizing charity concerts inspired by Eli's story. They called it the Voice of Hope Project. Funds were raised for children's hospitals, orphanages, and schools in need, all under Eli's name. He was invited to perform at a global charity event in New York City. When he walked onto that stage, a small boy in a too-big suit, holding his old guitar, the crowd of thousands fell silent. He took a deep breath and looked up at the blinding lights. Somewhere in that sea of people, he imagined his mother smiling. "This song," he said softly into the microphone, "isn't about me. It's about all of us. It's about how even the smallest voice can reach across the world if it comes from the heart. Then, he sang, and in that vast arena, with millions watching live, it felt as though time itself paused to listen. When the final note faded, there was silence. Then thunderous applause, cheers, tears, standing ovations. The next day, the world called him the boy who reminded humanity to feel again. But when reporters asked him what he wanted to do next, he didn't say record an album or go on tour. He said quietly, I want to go home. I want to sing for my mom, and that's what he did. He went back to Maple Hollow, where the air still smelled like dust and rain, where the trailer still stood by the field, but this time the lights were warm inside. His mother sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, waiting. He walked in, guitar on his back, smiling. Hey, Ma, he said softly. I brought the world home. She laughed, tears filling her eyes. I told you, baby. The world was always listening. He sat beside her, strummed the first chords of the song that started it all, the one from the old gymnasium, the one that carried their story across oceans and hearts. She closed her eyes, listening, her hand resting gently on his. Outside, the night was quiet, no cameras, no lights, no noise. Just a mother and her son, surrounded by the echoes of everything they had survived. And as he sang, the world kept listening, not because of fame, but because somewhere, deep down, everyone understood what his voice truly said, that kindness still exists, that hope can come from anywhere, and that even the smallest voice, when it sings with love, can touch the whole world. Years passed, but the melody never faded. The world still remembered the boy from Maple Hollow, the child whose voice crossed oceans and healed hearts. But for Eli Turner, fame was never the dream. He wasn't chasing lights or stages. He was chasing meaning. He had grown taller now, his voice deeper, but still carrying the same warmth that once silenced a crowded gymnasium. His mother, Clara, stronger than ever, often sat by the window of their small but newly built home, watching him write songs on the porch. They didn't live in the trailer anymore. The community, inspired by his story, had come together to build them a small house on the same land where he once sang to the stars. Every brick was a gift, every wall a reminder that kindness could rebuild what hardship had broken. And on most evenings, Eli could still be found outside strumming his old guitar, the same one from his first song. Its wood scarred but strong like him. After his story touched millions, people began asking him to perform around the world. He'd been to London, Tokyo, New York, Johannesburg, singing in languages he didn't know but feelings he understood. But no matter where he went, he carried Maple Hollow in his heart. He never forgot the nights without power, the dinners of canned soup, the sound of his mother's tired voice saying, "Just sing, baby. The world will listen." Now the world was listening. And he wanted to make sure it listened to the right things. He founded a project called The Voice of Tomorrow. It was a foundation that built music programs for children who had nothing, kids just like him, who needed a place to belong, a way to be heard. He would visit schools and orphanages, sitting on the floor with the children, teaching them how to turn pain into poetry, fear into rhythm, silence into song. You don't need fancy clothes or a big stage, he'd tell them softly. You just need a heart brave enough to sing. Everywhere he went, people cried, not because his voice was perfect, but because it was honest. One day, after a small concert at a children's hospital, a journalist asked him, "Eli, you've inspired millions. What do you think your purpose really is?" He smiled, looking at the group of kids laughing behind him. "To remind people that love still has a voice," he said simply. That quote spread across the internet, printed on posters, shared in classrooms, painted on murals. But to Eli, they were just words. The real message was in how people began to live them, because something beautiful had begun to happen. All over the world, people started organizing Voice of Tomorrow events, not just to sing, but to give. Food drives, hospital fundraisers, community music nights. Entire towns would gather, light candles, and play his songs. It wasn't about the boy anymore. It was about what his story had awakened in others. But even in all that beauty, Eli sometimes felt the weight of the world he carried. The fame, the expectations, they were heavy. There were nights he'd sneak away from the city lights and go back home to Maple Hollow, walking through the quiet streets that once made him feel invisible. One night he stopped by the old school. The paint was peeling, the lights dim, but the music room was still there. He pushed open the door. It creaked just like it used to. Inside, everything was the same: the dusty piano, the faded curtains, the posters of long-forgotten musicians. He sat down at the piano, his fingers trembling as they touched the keys. He began to play softly, humming the first tune he'd ever sung there, the one that started everything. Halfway through, he felt a presence. "You never stopped singing, did you?" He turned. It was Mrs. Daniels, older now, with silver hair and a smile that hadn't aged a day. He stood and hugged her tightly. "You found me," he said. "You were never lost," she replied. "You just kept moving forward." They sat for hours, reminiscing. The day he sang for the first time, the look on everyone's faces, the miracle that followed. Before he left, she said something that stayed with him forever. "The world may love your voice, Eli, but I loved your silence first, the part of you that was brave enough to try." He smiled, tears filling his eyes. "Thank you for hearing me when no one else did." Months later, Eli received an invitation that would change his life again. The United Nations wanted him to perform at an event dedicated to global unity and kindness, a gathering of leaders, artists, and dreamers from every corner of the earth. He hesitated at first. What could I possibly sing that matters to all of them? His mother touched his shoulder and said, "The same thing you've always sung, the truth." So he agreed. The night of the event, the stage was enormous, thousands of people seated under a sky of lights. Cameras from around the world were pointed toward him. Eli stepped up to the microphone, his heart calm. He looked out over the crowd. Presidents, activists, children, strangers, he said quietly, "This song isn't about where I came from. It's about where we can go together. It's called The Song That Never Ends." And then he began. The melody started soft, like a whisper, then grew, rich, soaring, powerful. It told the story of a small boy who once sang to an empty room, and how that song traveled farther than he ever could. As he sang, the audience began to hum along. People of every race, every language, every faith. The sound rose like a wave, carrying something ancient and universal: hope. By the final note, tears streamed down faces everywhere, not because the song was sad, but because it reminded them that even one small voice could unite the world. When the music faded, there was silence, then applause that seemed to shake the heavens. Eli bowed, not out of pride, but gratitude. Years went by. Eli grew older. His hair touched with gray, but his spirit still young. His mother lived to see her son's dream fulfilled, not just fame, but purpose. When she passed peacefully one spring morning, Eli didn't cry. He sang her favorite song, letting the notes carry her memory into the sky. After her funeral, he sat by her grave for hours, whispering softly, "You were right." "Ma," the world listened. He placed his old guitar beside her headstone, its strings worn, its body cracked, but still beautiful. That night, back home, he opened his window and let the breeze in. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear children singing one of his songs, voices high and pure, echoing through the town he once thought would forget him. He smiled. The melody drifted through the air, carried by laughter and life. It moved across streets, across fields, across oceans, just as his first song once did. It no longer belonged to him. It belonged to everyone, because Eli Turner had taught the world something timeless. That one small act of courage, One fragile note of truth can ripple through humanity forever. And though the boy from Maple Hollow was no longer the poor child he once was, he remained exactly who he had always been, a heart that refused to stop singing. As long as people believed in kindness, in compassion, in the beauty of simple humanity, his voice would live on. In every child who dared to dream, in every person who dared to help, in every soul who dared to hope. The poor boy's voice had touched millions around the world, and it never truly stopped.